Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Family Services Select Committee. I am Councillor Wala Idris, Chair of the committee, and I will be chairing tonight's meeting. The event is being streamed live on YouTube, and members of the public and the media are welcome to watch the meeting remotely and listen to the discussion taking place. Now I would like to welcome all those in the committee who are one at the Kensington Town Hall and everyone watching on YouTube. Before proceeding with the meeting, I will ask everyone present to please make sure your mobiles are on silent or switched off. And we will start with 72 seconds of silence to remember those we lost in Grenfell tragedy. I'd like to welcome Councillor Benkno to the committee. And apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Doris Whitney, Councillor Toby Benton, and Richard Drisick, Stella Gomez, and Amanda Sire. Have we received any from their coaches? Thank you. Does any member have an interest to declare?
It's possible that the discussion would come up about schools, and I'm a governor of Coalville and Marlborough, and that's their federation now.
Okay. The minutes of the previous meetings have been circulated. Does the committee agree that they be signed as a correct record? Yes. The first item on the agenda is Holland Park School. This report provides an update to the committee on Holland Park School's current governance and leadership status, and describes other key areas around the school, including the most recent Ofsted inspection results. Firstly, I would like to welcome Stephen Parsons, Senior Vice Principal at Holland Park School, and thank you for joining us today here. He will be joined by Councillor Folks and any supporting officers from the council to help any questions the committee might want to ask. We've read what's been sent to us, but is there anything you would like to add? Do you like any introduction, anything you'd like to say?
Yeah, I mean, I'm conscious that a lot of the things I was asked to sort of comment on in this meeting are included in the report, so I don't want to sort of repeat things just for the sake of going through it, because I think the report gives a pretty accurate summary of where the school is. It's obviously been through a difficult couple of years since the events of sort of April 22 and the Ofsted inadequate rating at that time. What I would say is that I'm pretty confident now if Ofsted turned up tomorrow, they would rate the school as a good school. It's come an awful long way in the time since those events happened, and obviously the previous leadership left the school. The school has joined United Learning, and it's very much been reborn and reinvented, and it's in a very positive place now. I think it's also worth drawing attention to the fact that despite the difficulty that the school has faced over the last couple of years, in terms of how the students performed, they've continued to do extremely well. So the results last summer, significantly above national average in every measure, a Progress 8 score of nearly plus 0.3, which is well above average, and A-level results, which were among the top 5% in the country. So I think it's worthy of note that despite the difficulties, the school has actually managed this period of transition very well, and has come through it well and is in a good place. We're also, the other things that I would mention is the SEN department, which is one of the areas which faced a lot of criticism at the time, and certainly for the 2 years that I've been there, initially as head teacher and now as senior vice principal after the move to United Learning, it's been certainly one of my proudest achievements, the way the SEN department has grown. So it's moved from a department of 5 people when I arrived at the school to now having a very strong SENCO, a deputy SENCO, an administrator in the SEN department, and 26 well-qualified learning coaches. So it's become a real hub and a real sort of model of what an SEN department should be. Safeguarding as well, although Ofsted deemed the school to be competent for safeguarding, it didn't pick up any issues around that, but that's also an area where we strengthened and brought in additional capacity, and that is working very well also. So the school, from September 2024, there is a new substantive head teacher who will be taking over from the school. Although Dame Sally Coates will continue to be the executive principal and continue to support the school for the foreseeable future on behalf of United Learning. But the school is now in a stable place. We're confident that we'll be full for the new cohort of Year 7 students. So we've come a long way. We're pleased with what we've achieved so far. There's still a long way to go. We want to be the best school in London, and we're not there yet, but we're very much on the right path.
Thank you. I'm going to be very boring and I'm just going to go down the road. Can I start with you, Em?
Yes, please. Thank you. I've got more questions on the next agenda item, but as far as the school itself is concerned, I've had a very long association, half a century, with Holland Park School, of the school in Hounslow, and so I've been following all its ups and downs. Possibly for that reason, and during the whole period of school exclusion, the safeguarding drama, chaos, I should say, not only some of the students and some of the former students, but also a lot of the parents came to me, and they still come to me. So it may be unfair because I do hear everything. So obviously they're going to tell me the bad bits, but a lot of the parents are still unhappy and struggling. So whether or not that's fair and a fair cross section of parents, I don't know. But there's still some there are still people who feel they have a lot of complaints about that. So
Sorry.
I know the results are looking good. I don't know if that's sort of legacy of the exclusions which we knew were over the top previously, which has come out in various reports over time, or not. It may not be. And I know that Kids Chelsea Foundation have been doing some work with children to keep them in school, which is really good. So I've got 2 questions. One of them is around that, about exclusions and how you're keeping people in school, because over the years I've known 20 young people who've been permanently excluded. So there's that side of it, which I'm sure you're going to tell me is getting on much better. And the other one is about the community use of school facilities, which has been an ongoing battle ever since that wretched school opened and the council paid for it. And the part of the deal was that the pool and the sports facilities and so on would be for the community. And I know what the issues are, but I just wondering where we are with that. So that's 2 questions.
Okay, I mean, in terms of exclusions, the school has done permanent exclusions where it has felt it has no option but to do permanent exclusions. It's always done as the last resort. We have developed very good relationships over the last few years with the other schools in the local authority and indeed in the neighbouring local authorities. So if we feel that a student needs a fresh start, we are using the option of a managed move far more than we were in the past. I mean, you'll be aware, I'm sure there is no formal system for managed moves in the borough.
There are statistics, aren't there? Because it's done.
It's done informally. So head teachers tend to speak to each other, but we do help each other out. We use that system, but it's not a formalised system in that sense. We've also made use of the alternative provision of the Ormiston academies where it's appropriate to do so. But we also, as I said, if we feel a student crosses a certain red line, or if we feel we have done all that we possibly can to support the student, then the student will be permanently excluded because we have expectations of our students and behaviours that we expect them to follow. So I think it's done reasonably and proportionately. It happens sometimes. I mean, in terms of the community use, the swimming pool continues to sit there with no water, and with at the latest quotes that I've heard, we're talking close to 1 million is going to be required to fix it properly. There are possibly some shorter term workarounds that might be able to be done for less, but my understanding is that United Learning and RBKC continue to be in discussion as to who should be footing the bill.
So it's accountable. Yeah.
I think, the debate is whether or not it's RBKC or United Learning who should be footing the bill for that.
So not the contractors, not the architects, nobody else. That's all history.
I think that it's down to United Learning or RBKC.
Totally. Last question. RBKC still have ownership.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we haven't dealt with that.
It's still.
Thank you.
Shall I just pick up on that question? So obviously, they haven't got a proper. They're still tenants at will. School. We haven't signed a formal lease, and one of the reasons that we haven't moved over to an academy lease is the fact of all the snagging and the swimming pool and other repairs that need doing at school, which we are, I would say, we're in dispute about who should be footing the bill for it. It was a shame that when we did offer some money to do the investigations for the swimming pool, to actually see what it really would cost and what actually was the problem. Unfortunately, the school didn't take up our offer of funding for that. So all I can say is an ongoing negotiation between us. And in fact, I've asked for a meeting to take place with Maxine Holsworth and senior people from to see if we can actually come to a resolution, because it's incredibly frustrating having invested 80 million in the school that we have got that our community use not functioning properly.
And not just community use.
Okay.
Sorry, so the school, I mean, it's United Learning rather than the Holland Park School that you're negotiating.
Sorry,
it's a trust, not the school itself.
Okay.
That was the point you wanted.
That was exactly the point I was going to make.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sir.
Thank you. Could I go back just briefly, Chair, to the question about exclusions? I just wanted to add, which you didn't reference, but I will, about children who may be at risk of suspension, not only exclusion, and also the school engages with the North Kensington inclusion pilots as well as part of the Grenfell response. And although there isn't a formal system in quite that way for managed move discussions, I can say to you that we do have regular contact with myself as the inclusion lead in the team with Shelley Duffy, but also my colleague who is the lead on exclusions for wards. So we're constantly consulted and kept informed about these arrangements. So we do have a handle on what's going on in terms of managed moves, some of which are very successful, others
Okay, so you have the stats or the numbers or the.
we know which ones.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to know that.
Yeah, we like to know where the children are. That's
It's also it's not one-way traffic.
No.
Holland Park actually receives children in through the managed moves process as well, in support of other schools. It is an informal arrangement between the RBKC schools and others that sort of sit around borough boundaries.
Again, through the Fair Access Protocol, which is securing places for children without a school base where schools go over numbers, and Holland Park, along with the other schools, contributes really positively to that and takes children in who don't have a school place and go over numbers.
Thank
Hope that's helpful.
Sonia?
Yeah. So obviously it's fantastic that Holland Park School achieves such excellent A-level results and educational outcomes. I don't have a sort of decades-long relationship with the school, but I've just, having read through the Ofsted report from 2022, one of the key criticisms was an absence of or a lack of an effective strategy for managing people's behaviour. And that was mentioned as an increase in serious incidents of poor behaviour, some spilling out into the local area, bullying and so on. So where in the main report is that addressed, or is there an update on?
On behaviour,
Yeah,
yeah, I mean.
which I assume is separate to the safeguarding support update.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't asked specifically to report on behaviour, but I'm happy to give an update. I mean, essentially, when I started 2 years ago, we introduced centralised systems for behaviour. Previously, behaviour had been left very much at the teacher's discretion, so you had different teachers doing different things. And there was also, under the previous leadership, as came out through the Ofsted reports and the investigation that followed, a culture of fear, essentially, in the past, which was used to manage behaviour. So behaviour is now managed with a positive spin. So we look more to reward positive behaviour, to offer incentives for students to do well. We do have very clear systems and procedures for when students misbehave. They're very clear about what sanctions are likely to be for certain things that they may do wrong. It's been shared with families. It's been shared with all of the students. It's something that's revisited regularly with staff. So the behaviour in the school is good. We have students that present challenging behaviour at times. Of course, we do. We are a large comprehensive school, and all schools face those challenges. But generally, if you were to come to school, and you're very welcome to visit and to walk around, you will see a school that is calm and well ordered and very purposeful. In terms of serious incidents in the community, there have been very, very few that I can think of in the 2 years that I have been there.
So has that progress followed the implementation of very clear sort of set of?
Yeah, I mean, the behaviour policy was completely rewritten in September 22 when I arrived, and rewritten or significantly tweaked again in September 23. So we're at a point now where we feel it's working well, and we will continue to just make sure that it's implemented consistently. The behaviour at school is.
I can attest, because I have a role on the School Improvement Board, which is the local governing board, really, in essence, separate from the trust board. And I can attest that the children are polite, courteous, they're interested, they will chat, take me to the room that I'm going to visit, which incidentally takes you through or past the new sort of SEND-based, special educational needs base, which is no longer hidden away. I think that's quite important to acknowledge that, these children, it is demonstrative, I believe, of the more inclusive approach that the school now has. And I think that's very encouraging. It's important to note, I think, that Holland Park Academy, as they stand under United Learning, hasn't yet had an Ofsted inspection, and that will be 2 years from the time that they converted, which was January.
Well, January 26 is where we're inspecting it. So we are officially a new school. So although obviously people still associate that old Ofsted report from 2 years ago with the school, technically that belongs to a school which is now closed, and we are new Holland Park, who have not yet had an Ofsted.
New leadership team, new policies, new everything almost. Thanks.
Actually, I have two questions. First of all, on 5.5, you talk about the narratives for the rain. How do they compare with comparable local schools, for example, KLA or St. Charles, how do they compare with prior years? And I don't expect you to be able to recall direct comparatives, but I was hoping to be able to give me a steer that they are broadly comparable, that actually 2023 was better or less good, notwithstanding COVID difficulties or whatever. And how do they are they very similar relatively to KAA and St Charles or not?
I mean, at A level, we're significantly above all of the other RBKC schools. As I said, in the top 5% in the country, the A level results. The GCSE results, I can't remember what KAA got, but I seem to remember we were ahead of KAA, we were ahead of Chelsea Academy, we were ahead of the other local comprehensive schools in terms of the results. Certainly in terms of the outcomes, I can't remember if our progress measure was ahead of them as well. But we compare very strongly compared to the other local schools and significantly above national level.
And second, you aspired to be the best school in London. What does that mean, and how far are you from that? And if you were to say a local school that was very much in football terms, the four in the Premier League qualify for that, which would they be, assuming that you're not?
What does the best school in London be? I mean, there's different parts to that, and I guess I said it slightly flippantly, and I wish I hadn't. But
That's why.
But I want the school where behaviour is the best that it can be, where students are highly self-motivated.
I've just been to the final day for my son, who goes to a free school in a contiguous borough, and they all say that. But I'm asking you, because I'm a counsellor here, and you are being scrutinised, what that actually means, because the generic way they will behave well, that's great, but everyone says that. I want slightly more specifics.
Well, I mean, schools are judged in a number of different ways. For us to be the best school in London, we would be coming out at the top or near the top in all of those different measures. So it would be in terms of academic outcomes, it would be for comparable schools, it would be in terms of the progress measures that the schools make, it would be in terms of the popularity and the number of people wanting to come to the school, it would be around the levels of things like attendance, levels around things like suspensions, all of those different measures that we are held accountable for. I would want us to be performing among the very top schools in London, and if we're doing that across all of those measures, then I think we probably would be close to being one of the best schools in London. We're not there yet. We're not making any pretense that we are. We're a good school, and we're a school which I think has the potential to go further and continue to get better and better. But it's a journey. You know, basically 2 years ago when I started, we almost built again from scratch. You know, the entire leadership team, a couple of individuals had gone. All of the systems were relaunched, rewritten, and it's a journey. And turning schools around and getting them where you want to go, it's like turning the proverbial cruise ship. It takes time. It's not something that happens overnight. It's not something that happens in a year. But you know, in another 2 or 3 years, when we've had a good period of stability and embedding everything that we're doing, I would like to think we're going to be in a much stronger place. So outstanding from Ofsted in 2026, probably not, but by the next visit after that, I'd like to think we'd be in with a good shout, depending on whether or not Ofsted still exists in its current form by the time we get there.
Thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to also pay tribute to the academic results, and yes, so thank you. Under 5.6 and on to safeguarding support. My question's around the area of how do you assess the preparedness of the children that are coming to you at the beginning of their stay, before, or maybe even before they come to you, and then how you guide them in terms of safeguarding, particularly in relation to social media, because I'm a governor of 2 primary schools, and don't have experience in secondary school, but certainly in primary schools, for example, prevent training I went to yesterday almost entirely focused on the influence of social media on young people. Now, if we're feeling it seriously at primary, you must have it in abundance in secondary. So it's really how you assess those coming into the school, how prepared they are to use social media sensibly, and then how do you guide them through to safeguarding.
I mean, if I start with the sort of general transition into the school, I mean, this year we've had all of our New Year Sixes visited the school a couple of weeks ago for a morning to sort of begin to orientate themselves and find their way around and to meet teachers. And they will do that again later in the summer term. One of our assistant head teachers who leads on admissions and transition is visiting all of our main feeder primary schools. So she will go and talk to the students in their own schools, hear about their sort of, how they're feeling about coming to Holland Park. What are they looking forward to? What are they nervous about? That kind of stuff. When they actually start with us, we have a very staggered start at the school over the first week of term. So the first day, they will be the only ones in the school. So they get to find their way around and find the canteen and all of that sort of stuff before the other students come back. And the other year groups come back gradually over the course of that week. So there's a sort of gentle introduction there. They also spend in the first week, there are a whole raft of things that we go through with them, either in assemblies or they have extended periods of time with their form tutor. And that's when we would go through all of the things they need to know about safeguarding. So who the safeguarding team are, they're introduced to them in assembly, and they're shown where their offices are when they have a tour of the school, so they know where to go if they have a concern. We talk about bullying and what they need to do if they either witness or experience any bullying and who they need to report to. And part of that training, I mean, those sorts of things continue throughout the year, largely through the PSHCE programme. We now have an online safety policy, which was created last year. We've appointed a member of staff who is the online safety lead for the school also. So in terms of things like social media, through their PSHCE lessons predominantly, and also a bit through their computing lessons, we cover, the perils of social media and the dangers that it can lead to. It is a big challenge for schools, and not least the pace of change, because by the time people of my generation have got our heads around Facebook, there have been 5 other things that have taken over in terms of what students are using. So it is something we're very conscious of. It is something that we keep coming back to when we talk about a lot, and many issues that we might find ourselves dealing with originate on social media. It's a problem for schools to tackle. It's a much wider society issue in my view, but we do a lot of training, support, induction with students when they arrive, and that continues their time with us.
I think it's so fair to add that this is not unique to Holland Park. This is a broader issue, but the Kensington head teachers, secondary head teachers have discussed, for example, the recent mobile phone guidance that came out from the DfE, because obviously children have access to phones during the day. There are issues, but most schools, the head teachers discussed, agreed, most had a consistent policy in terms of no mobile phones during the day. They might be confiscated at scene, so they use them outside of school. But the training part of the curriculum, part of the PSHE, this is generally what all schools are required to do and do. It's quite a focus on e-safety, but I don't think that's specific to Holland Park. I think that's
No.
I'm sort of asking the question whether you. I get the feeling that actually, I think I'm older than you are, and I'm finding it even more difficult to keep up with things. I've got 3 young sons, so my feeling is that we're not winning this battle at the moment. If I'm wrong, please assure me.
Mobile phones. I'd agree with what Shelley said. I mean, I don't think it's watching. I forget what I say. The fact that the DfE only a few months ago got around to publishing some guidance about mobile phones, it wasn't overly helpful, to be honest, because schools, I think, were way ahead of the game on that. Holland Park, by some quirk of design, I'm pretty sure it wasn't intentional. You don't get a phone signal in your area, so that we don't have that issue so much anyway. the phones are not an issue in school. Students know we know they've got them, and parents want them to have them when they're walking to and from school. They want to be safe, and that's fine. They know that if they get them out and are caught with them during the day, it will be confiscated, and if that happens, they'll get it back at the end of the day. If it happens a second time, the parents have to come and collect it, and it really isn't an issue. Controlling the social media is a much greater issue, because so much of that happens when they're not in school. And things like the development of AI and artificial intelligence is a whole nother level of challenge for schools to grapple with over the coming years.
Steve, would you say that my experience of working with the school is that school works hard to keep the school as a safe space for the children to be able to talk to people about things that are worrying them? Obviously, everything that's been said about the curriculum in terms of keeping safe online, but also the importance of the interface with parents and carers, and how they can work in partnership with all of us about, children being kept safe. Lots of parents will say, of course, we want our child to have a phone. So if they get into difficulties from school, or they don't arrive home a bit late, we can contact them. But I think it's often a situation where something's happened outside of school and then it comes into school. But at least that means we know about it, and the school can assist in contributing to addressing it.
And slightly building on this, because it's relevant to the youth review that's coming later, is that I know Holland Park School, because we've been talking to them as part of the youth review, are doing a lot of work on after school clubs and things. So to Emma's point about children leaving school and suddenly causing a bit of disruption in the area. So I think that's really great. You've probably read or seen Andrew and Neil talking about what All Saints are planning to do, so that there are more activities for children, that when they go there, they can do more there after school and then not be looking at their phones or going home and looking at social media. So I'm looking forward to seeing that programme of classes and things that you're going to put on. It's great.
So it's wider than just one school. It's a societal problem. It's one that we've got to keep at. And maybe we need to return to this subject next year. Thank you very much.
Thank you. My question is, I have two questions, small ones. One is, what is the percentage of students who are from the borough versus those from outside the borough? And my second question is, there was no mention at all in COVID and post-COVID anything. I'm just curious. Is there any issues that you can allocate to the fact that it's because of COVID, certain people are not attending, certain people? So what kind of issues are you suffering in the school because of COVID?
Okay, so to answer your first question about the percentage that are from RBKC and the percentage who are from elsewhere, the answer is I don't know. I'm sorry, I don't have those figures off the top of my head, but I'm sure I can find and send them through if that would be helpful for you. COVID, I mean, it's undoubtedly, again, I'm sort of all schools, not just Holland Park. Holland Park, like all schools, is still feeling the after effects of COVID. So from attending, the RBKC and teachers meetings, that the common things that we are attributing to COVID is the fact that attendance is well down on where it was at pre-pandemic levels. I mean, at Holland Park, our attendance is well above the national average, but it's below where it was pre-COVID, and that's the story, I think, for all the RBKC schools. Behaviour is another thing where there is a general consensus among the RBKC head teachers that behaviour is more challenging now than it has been in the past. And again, it's hard to definitively say that's because of COVID, but it's likely that period of time where students didn't have that sort of structure and that rigour in their day, or didn't necessarily have that rigour in their day, has created students who have struggled to get back into routines in a way that we would have wanted them to. So it's hard to say specifically that that was definitely around COVID, but I think those are probably the two areas where we feel we are still probably dealing with the legacy of COVID, and we may for some time to come as well. Things like the gaps in learning, which was, you know, the big fear to start with around COVID, was just that students weren't in lessons, they weren't learning. I think schools, Holland Park included, have done a pretty good job in catching up on the academic side of what was lost during COVID. I think the issues around attendance and behaviour are a longer term challenge.
And again, much more widespread than just Holland Park or RBSS.
Yeah, I'm just
And that's-
curious to know if, because it is virtually a new school, so maybe you didn't have the pre-COVID attitudes and just.
I think internationally,
Yeah.
schools are facing, education systems are facing the lower attendance, that lack of return, the behavioural issues that are seen actually in rises in parental complaints more broadly. Grievances again more broadly across society. We're seeing that, and of course, it has impact upon our children.
Thank you. I think we covered just about everything. We talked about safeguarding progress, preparing the swimming pool, and the possibility of working together with the borough to actually utilize the pool. Exclusions, we discussed results of GCSEs and A levels that are better than the average from the borough, which is fantastic to hear. We also had an idea about the vision of the school and where the school is going, being the best. That's a very good place to start. And we discussed phones, mobiles, social media, the effect on children, on kids it has. And then finally we got to the challenge of COVID and what have you. And you probably, when you get some stats to tell me students from the borough versus those from outside the borough, that would be great. Thank you so much for your
We
time.
can provide you with those too.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. And now we can yes, the personal cohort educational outcome. This report provides an update to the committee on the education work of the Grenfell Dedicated Service, setting out the education offer, attainment at key stages 1, 2, and 4, post-18 education, employment and training at the end of stage 5. I would like to invite officers and we leave to it. That's great. Thank you. So would you like to say something or?
You read the report.
Yes, we always assume that everything. But if you have, and this is an opportunity for you, if you wanna, if there is something you think we need to know, or you would like to.
Not specifically. I think that we're constantly striving to do as much as we can for this cohort. We recognise a significant impact that the traumas have on them.
Yes.
I'm happy to take any feedback or any questions.
Fantastic. I will start the questions and I'm going to start with you, Dave.
4.2, we recognise that given the size of the cohort, that providing attainment data is particularly complex, with risks being able to identify individual pupils smoothly. How many, what percentage of the pupils actually to live in Notting Day? Could you not use that as a proxy
So
for those affected and look carefully at Notting Day results collectively, see what the issues are?
So this is specifically for bereaved and survivor children. It
I
doesn't.
noticed.
Okay, so because often in the cohort there's less than 10 kids, it means that other people within the community will be able to work out who they are really easily. So we have to try and balance really carefully the fact that the vast majority of these kids have parents who don't consent for us to have access to the data because they feel they're perfectly capable of parenting their own child. So we have to balance what's shared with us and their privacy and their right to privacy. So it's, I understand the challenge.
It's not only Notting Down children who are affected.
No,
I accept that, but it may be actually a not bad proxy. I don't know.
A lot of children that I don't think so much, because the children are connected in all kinds of ways, not just geographical.
And bereavement survivors aren't necessarily just in RBKC schools. So bereaved children are all over the country potentially. So it very much depends on where the children are, but we're really, we protect their confidentiality in line with the trust that they give us. We have to respect that. So any opportunity where they can be identified, we don't provide detailed information. We provide kind of the generic or the local and national data.
On page 13, 15% homeschool struck me as being very high. It may not. Page 13, 6.2.
Top page.
Yeah.
54% of the pupils attend schools outside the local authority, okay, and 15% are homeschooled. That struck me as being very.
It might be 2 children.
Yeah.
They're tiny cohorts. We're talking 10 or 12 kids max in any one of these cohorts.
Okay.
So we're talking a parents make a decision to homeschool a couple of kids.
That doesn't
Yeah.
make sense if you're saying
Sorry, yeah.
a very small cohort.
Yes.
Okay, Sonia?
Hi. So I'm just interested in more of the sort of small, I suppose, anecdotal, qualitative, I suppose, insights you can give us, particularly around what's meant. So support. So firstly, actually, the average child in any of these stages, I mean, and over their sort of usual week or month, how much of their time is taken up being with this sort of educational offer that the council is providing, and what does it actually look like in a sort of tangible sense? And then what support has been given around home learning in particular? I suppose that the average child wouldn't have. Like what sort of bespoke support has been given in that sense as well? And the final thing as well is what is meant by targeted training around phase 2 of the Grenfell Tower and fire and how this will impact those most affected.
Let me start with the last question.
Sorry,
That's okay.
I said it all.
Trauma impacts children in ebbs and flows.
Yeah.
And it's up and down. We're very conscious that through phase 2 of the Grenfell Tower inquiry, particularly around the inquests last summer, that had quite a significant impact on children and young people. So we provided bespoke training to schools that needed it or where it would be supportive to provide them with kind of headline data on what that was going to look like, what the different phases were, what the timings were, so that they were able to identify the needs in the kids as and when they were cropping up. So I suppose I will often get a phone call from a school saying, so-and-so is behaving really out of character this week. Is there anything going on that I'm not clocking? And try and marry it up. So, for example, testimony week that happened recently was really, really difficult for a lot of our kids. And there were lots of ebbs and flows in the way that that presented in school. And because of the kind of training that we go into schools to deliver, they were aware of that and can catch it and support that child in a really supportive way, instead of it ever heading down a punitive route.
So it's sort of delivered through by teachers. There aren't.
So the training is delivered to teachers and support staff.
Yeah. Okay, so sorry, just forgive me, to clarify, when you say many of them have bespoke support plans in place, that's done by schools?
It's done in school.
Or if someone's, I suppose, 15% who are homeschooled, that's done by families or?
So if they are homeschooled, it's slightly different because that's a decision a parent makes that they don't want them in a mainstream school. Yeah. So they will be supported in terms of advice and guidance and support in finding other homeschool networks.
Right.
But actually they take on that responsibility. If there are then specific needs that come up, then we'll support them to get the right advice, support, guidance, diagnosis, whatever it looks like.
Yeah.
But in terms of what they're delivering at home, that's very, we can point them in the right direction of where to get advice and guidance, but as the local authority, we can't dictate what a homeschool parent is going to be teaching their child. That's very much for them to determine.
And then there was a question about the support around COVID and home learning.
So for COVID and home learning, so for COVID, we rolled out a number of different things. We rolled out a programme called Education for Recovery, where every child age dependent received a fund that had some specifics around it. So for different age groups, they got access to laptops, tablets, whatever it was that was age appropriate to make sure that they could access the material that was coming in from school. We delivered kind of before schools did, we created Google Classrooms for every year group from reception up to year 11 that parents could access, so that in that first sort of 3-4 week period when nothing was happening, parents didn't feel like they were at loose ends. We had a primary school specialist who was working with and delivering online sessions in English and maths for primary school teachers and working with parents, particularly EAL parents, to help them understand with translation what it was their children were being asked to do each time, prevent those gaps in learning. We provided a targeted tuition fund that was for years 6, years 11 and years 13, which has run up until this academic year, which provided parents with choice and control and a pot of money that they could use specifically to put tutoring in place to help close any of those learning gaps that had been created through COVID. One more thing I want to say, I've forgotten. Those are the main ones, I think. And then we offer bespoke support, but it's sort of joke, we're like the NHS. I hope they never need to use us, but if they do, we're here for advice and guidance and support in whatever capacity that looks like for parents.
But there's no sort of direct student.
We have an after-school program, running for up until last July, which provided English and maths and science for years reception through to GCSE. That was bespoke and targeted around the groups of pupils who wanted to engage in it. It was offered both online and in person. And that ended in line with what the bereaved survivors told us that they wanted in July of last year, because they felt that it had sort of come to its natural end and they were happy to be doing things back in school.
Can I tell one more question actually? So you said the trauma comes in ebbs and flows, and obviously to an extent you can, I suppose, anticipate where it might be needed around an inquiry, for example. But how do you identify where, or how do you, I suppose, spot where people might be struggling or falling behind, or might need signposting to counselling or something like that?
So across the dedicated service, every family has an allocated dedicated service worker that they're in relatively regular contact with as part of their support plan. They will discuss what the different types of needs are for any individual family. It would only come via my team if it's a particular learning need or an education need, and that can be flagged. We're a consent-based service, so it's all done whether a parent is happy to either have that conversation or they've given consent to a school to call and have that conversation with us. And then we work really closely with the Grenfell Health and Wellbeing dedicated service, who have a specialist team and fast track any of the bereaved survivor children straight into therapy within sort of, I think it's under a week. And assessments are done. I've had a dyslexia assessment done in 3 days. If I needed it, which I needed urgently because it was a A-level student. So we work really closely with the NHS as well, but we are a consent-based service, so it really depends on what parents or children are asking for.
Thank you.
Thank you. Emma? Thank you. Again, I hear a lot of stories on the ground. Nobody's getting assessments within 3 days and they're getting mental health.
Bereaved survivors do. It's bereaved survivors get fast tracked into the Grenfell Health and Wellbeing service.
I just hear a lot of things, including that, and I know it's very difficult to talk about. I mean, I'm supposed to talk about it, but the, suicidality and the 2 suicides that I know of teenagers, Grenfell related, which have been really horrific actually, and that affects the whole family. And the young people who don't tell anybody when they're self-harming and so on. And that's really difficult. So the parents tell me they won't tell anybody else. It's just horrible when that happens. I've had a few reports of that, but there has been a recent suicide which was horrific, really awful, just really disturbing. So I'm a bit worried about the about the pastoral care being given, because that varies a lot between the schools. They maybe get excellent in every other way, but it's that pastoral care and kindness actually, and the patients. So one of the complaints I get from parents is that some people at school think that, oh, it's been 7 years, it should be better now. Why don't you just, put yourself up and all the rest of it? So that's fine. And I'm glad this report has just come out, which I'm sure you've read, from Cancer and Chelsea Foundation. It just came out last week, and there was a thing that some people went to this morning. anyway, it's Kensington Chelsea Foundation, Deacon, and they focus quite a lot on teenage and access to mental health. So a lot of the things that I was going to tell you anecdotally are in here, luckily. So evidence. It's just that the difficulty of getting the right kind of mental health support for younger people is it all comes out there. And of course, we know trauma doesn't go away; it's always there. So that's as you say, it comes and goes. I'm glad that's acknowledged. And something, and I would definitely read this. It's alarming, actually. I was quite sure it was getting worse. And I think that's my experience, that people are suffering worse now. And it may be because of the final reports coming out. I don't know.
The statistics keep changing. So in the annual NHS Children and Young People survey, if you look at the pre-COVID figures, it was 1 in 9 children and young people used to have a mental health problem, particularly in the teenage years. During COVID, that became 1 in 6. People hoped that figure would drop back to 1 in 9, and actually in last year's survey it was 1 in 5.
Yeah.
So it is getting worse. And actually, social media and all the things you've talked about before with Holland Park, the national picture is quite worrying.
And the kind of expectation that people should be getting better, and they're just not. So that's all of those things I'm concerned about. And this is secondary school age that I get a lot of information, but so that's not great. So I think one of the real problems that I see, which isn't reflected here, is just that the difficulty of access. And you're telling me about extreme examples and their fast track, which is fantastic. There are an awful lot of young people out there who are not getting the access to the support, and that's in here. It's not just me. It's a report, which I hope you're right.
I can only talk. I will absolutely read it. I can only talk to the bereaved survivor population. Those folks are talking about. I understand that mental health in this country, particularly for young people, is increasingly challenging.
It's horrific, and I mean we know that. So anyway, it's in here. Please read this, and it's. I don't know what we do about that. It's not great for adults either. Obviously, getting mental health support at the moment generally, but for that generation who have been sort of scarred by what they've experienced, it's not the information I get that they're being fast tracked and getting help in. So I'm glad you think they are, but I don't think it's in every case. That's for sure.
Just to pick up, I mean, I think the dedicated service for our incredible children, they really are fast tracked, because you've got the numbers here, they're relatively small.
220
children that you're really focusing on. But can I just finish?
Suicide was a very family, so
But there's still, but I think your broader point is that we were talking to the ICB just earlier today, is actually some of our health colleagues who aren't delivering the mental health quickly enough that they should do, and it's actually getting the things to move up that line. So I'm not sort of saying it's not our responsibility, it's all theirs, it's all our responsibility, but I think this service really is doing a good job focusing on this cohort of children.
We work really closely with the NHS, and we advocate as strongly as we can if we know there's a need. There are always going to be cases where a family doesn't share it with us, or they don't share it with their worker. But as we're a consent-based service, there's only so much, unless it represents safeguarding risk.
A lot of people feel shame.
Yeah. But I think that comes to the piece of that talking to all the schools and everyone to signpost that if they pick up that child in school or any other area, that they do flag that to the right people, so that, or to the parents, or to whatever, to encourage them to ask for special services, because you say you can't just go and take children out and help them unless they ask.
And they have to be ready as well. Is the other part.
Well, yeah.
So there are lots of kids who are entering adolescence, for example, who, if you consider the way in which their brains are now developing, how they may have been absolutely fine following the fire, they may have managed it quite well, they may have been really stable, and now they're not. And it's about being able to pivot, I suppose, and get them what they need now. But there's also a barrier in terms of they may not want support, they may not be ready for the support, it may not be the right support, it may take a few attempts, and they're kids and often teenagers. And so you're also dealing with lots of other things coupled in with it. It's not, there isn't a one size fits all type thing, but we certainly, if we're aware of it, we refer in, and they have access to it if they want it.
Thank you.
Can I just add one aspect, just on the we picking up the conversation we've just been having with on the consent. So obviously I understand it's a consent-based service. But I suppose like speaking from, Grenfell aside, just from my own experience and people I know, or younger people I know, often it's useful to just have a sort of even though it is a consent-based service, children don't necessarily speak up when they're struggling. They might not know how to articulate reasons, and they might just suffer in silence. So I think often it's helpful to have systems and structures in place to just check in and not necessarily wait until someone. So I assume that.
So I would expect their schools to have that in place.
Yes,
Makes sense. We're not in place of any of the statutory services that I would expect and do often pick those things up. And often with the children and young people, when I say consent based, we need parental consent to even have. We wouldn't have a conversation with the child without parental consent.
And just picking up on
But
that,
to have something-
the educational psychologists, who we have
Yeah.
excellent ones in this borough for, also go around the schools to exactly pick that up, but to also talk to all the other teachers and the people in the schools, to the point you're saying, because, are you looking at it? Are you picking?
asking children, are you okay? What are you struggling with, etc.
But I mean, even if you're asking them, they might not sort of
They
say.
might not do, but there are certainly lots of systems in place, pastoral systems in place. A form tutor, for example,
Yeah.
notice if a child comes in be looking anxious or presenting in a different way suddenly, I'd expect a form tutor to then go and have a conversation with the head of year or whatever the
Yeah.
processes are in that school for it to start getting escalated up. And sometimes with consent that will come to me because they want advice on how to talk to the parents, or we're concerned about this, but we don't really know if there's any truth to it, but we want to have a conversation and what's the best way to go about it. And we operate kind of a very open door policy, but ultimately for those kind of day-to-day things, I'd expect the schools to be doing that, which they do a brilliant job of.
Thank you.
It's interesting you should mention the schools in this context, because one of the, I'm a governor of the Children's Hospital, and one of the shocks that a couple of people from the ICB kind of direction that we have to deal with as governors sometimes, what they didn't realise is their practitioners in the NHS are lucky to get an hour or two child, unless it's really a severe acute case, high needs case. And we have 30 plus hours a week for the school side. In those tutors and class teachers are with the children for the whole day, every day of every week during term time. Therefore, the footprint of schools with children many hundreds of times greater than the footprint of the NHS with children. And so that they hadn't grasped as a paradigm at all. The question I wanted to ask was around. The first thing I wanted to say was under 5.4, the list of services or areas of work, I think is an excellent summation of good practice, ways in which every school ought to be addressing its children. Obviously, the specifically Grenfell related ones here. And in the school, one of the schools where I'm a governor, we had 100 Afghans in, and they were traumatized for different reasons. And this list was, slightly different because they were slightly different concerns. But I think it's a very good statement. It's headlines, there's not detail around it, but it's a very good statement and a very useful one to include in the papers. Thank you for that. The question I wanted to ask though was around, and I think there is some evidence coming out there, and it is small cohorts. The question's around those children who are not born at the time of Grenfell, and how much effect is Grenfell having on them as opposed to their senior colleagues, older colleagues, and whether the effect is different, and whether we're actually helping them, whether the help they need is different, and whether we're being more successful or less successful in that. It's like, or maybe there isn't a difference. I mean, that's really one question I'm asking.
It's a complex question. I'm not sure I'm qualified to answer, if I'm being totally frank. If we look at the Key Stage 1 cohort, they're performing above national and local averages. So, but it's anecdotal because it's such a small number of kids. So it's not necessarily in the context of the whole picture particularly helpful. I think it depends on the context of every individual family. It depends on what an individual child is doing. A bereaved child's experience would be impacted by their parents' ability to parent them and all the things that come with that, but that is equal for a survivor family. So Ask the NHS or someone far more qualified than me. I can't, yeah, I couldn't give you any concrete answer on that with any
Okay.
qualification that would be meaningful.
You see him talking regularly in the NHS. Are
Yes.
the NHS really interacting as effectively as they could be with you? So there.
I think that for the bereaved and survivor children, we have a very, very good relationship with the specific, they have a Grenfell dedicated service.
Yeah.
And on that service, nothing I ask for is too much. So
Okay.
I couldn't ask for anything more out of that particular service.
Because it's my experience, anecdotally, again, small stats, where an early years teacher, the child of age 2 identified intermediary needs on SEN support, told by the NHS at the first discussion that it wasn't available. Having pushed a bit, it was proven to be discretionary. For severe needs, it was available even pre-nursery, but normally they wouldn't tackle it until nursery or primary. It was on an intermediary basis. Having pushed for it and got it, the progress that the child's making is sufficient for her to think, this teacher to think. But it's quite possible that that child has gone on a path which is no longer in special school, going to be in general school with support. And the ramifications of that for life chances and all sorts of other aspects of that are dramatic.
Yeah.
And I think that perhaps from evidence from Grenfell and evidence from schools, this is an area that our family and children's services need to address further in discussion with NHS. Because if we're going through transformations of how we might be best counsel, we can achieve a better balance of intermediate use of intermediary interventions at the stage through a diagnosis. That there is the possibility that we could achieve dramatically better results and cheaper ones in society.
Agreed, but I'm going to let Councillor.
Now, if I could pose that maybe to a
Well, I mean, I agree. I think we might appreciate if you asked the ICB Grenfell dedicated team to come here and scrutinise them.
Okay.
That might be helpful for all of us to get some information out of them.
That-
Sorry to give you a
in a different context, that's
Anyway,
wise thing to say.
in a different context, that's something I already have asked.
So I think early intervention is always, you look at lots of things and you imagine a funnel. The more you put at the early intervention, the less it trickles through to the end, and absolutely,
Yeah.
the earlier we can identify, the more support can be put in place, the less likely there is to be high needs later on.
As much of that stardust on the paragraph 5.4. I think it's a very strong statement. Good practice.
Yeah.
Intent.
And I think the results show that. I mean, actually, the results are amazing
Yeah.
that these COVID children have done so well, given the sort of terrible circumstances that they've been in.
I think particularly for the Key Stage 4 and Key Stage 5s who were just going into secondary school or had just started secondary school at the time of the fire, I think the levels of resilience that they've shown are incredible.
Anyway, thank you.
Have you found any measures or any system or any method that you use more successful than others? 1 and 2, do you have any families who absolutely don't want anything to do with any help in school? And
Yes, in answer to your second question, there are some families who don't want anything to do with WKC, so information is sent through advocates, lawyers, the same offers are made, same offer of access to things. In terms of, sorry, can you repeat your first?
any
Anything
measure
that's worked more than something else?
the others, yeah. What do you find more success with?
Listening would be, I suppose, really listening and giving people the space to be heard, because often it's what people don't say. But if you don't give them the space to talk, you don't read between the lines of what it is they're trying to say. And particularly, if you're looking at, for example, a child with potential SEN needs very early on, what you're doing is intuitively picking up on. A parent may not know what it is they're concerned about, they just know there's something, and so
Something is
giving them the
not quite.
space and the time to talk that through and to work it out and then work out what's next. And I think collaboration and working, the dedicated service was a co-created service. the education part of it was incredibly important to the families from the get-go. It is an incredibly important part of their value system and what they want for their children and what they want for their futures. And continuing to check back in and make sure that what we're delivering is still what they want is really important. And I suppose the only other thing would be that we handed over control to lots of things to children on a youth forum in our second year of creation. So it took us about a year to find, what it was they really wanted and get everything up and running and get the systems in place. And from year 2, we've operated a pretty successful youth forum where children and young people have had a huge amount of control over how the money is spent, the types of things that are important to them and what they want. So I suppose continuing to listen and make sure they feel heard. And we don't have to make them feel the way they felt for example.
And I think that's the trick, is because a lot of people say we listen, we can listen. I think listening and actually hearing the person is far more crucial than just this.
Yeah.
Because you can listen and you're thinking about your troubles.
I'm picking up on nuance and all those things in
Yeah.
between.
Yeah.
So I think if that would be the most successful thing I think we've done, building relationships with the family and trust.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I guess we covered everything, and this is a very good way to end. We talked about the services, the dedicated service, talked about homeschooling, type of support given. We even discussed whether which support, which element helps better, and talked about mental health and issues and the role of delivery, the NHS support given, and talked about early intervention. I think we covered just about everything, and we can move on to the next topic, which is item A6, the youth service review. This support updates the select committee on the consultation and engagement finding for commissioned youth services. The committee are recommended to consider the attached report and decide whether the committee wishes to make any comments, for example, in response to the consultation activity and identify priorities. I would like to welcome. Oh, everybody's here. Hello. Okay, would you like to say something, add something, just?
Absolutely. I think we all want to say something because we're very excited about what we're doing here. So I'll give a sort of introduction and then hand over to my colleagues here to just sort of see what they focused on. I think actually it was a really good point we just ended about listening.
Yes.
Because the whole thing is because we have listened both to our young people as to what they want to see in their youth clubs, and we've listened to the voluntary sector about how they want to work with us to deliver a much broader and much more inclusive youth offer for our young people. So that was the sort of starting point. We're incredibly lucky in this council that we do invest this much money still in our young people. And as we say in this programme, we committed to investing it for the next 5 years. But when we looked across the board, though, and I had a meeting with Nicola and various other voluntary sector, they were going, well, you've got your commission services in various places, but you're only reaching a particular cohort of children, and it's the same children who are going to there. And actually, there just wasn't nearly enough breadth of what we were offering. And they wanted to have more opportunities, particularly for girls, which comes out in this, spaces for them to go. They wanted more opportunities to actually learn things and pick up in these clubs. So we're, particularly around skills and employment that comes out in here. The voluntary sector have a lot more to offer. So they want to come forward and say, well, maybe you haven't spoken to about this, but we could deliver a programme, as you've seen, and my colleagues will talk about actually the various areas that we've addressed that we want to do more on. And then I think Sarah's going to discuss, which I think is very exciting about this, is the whole system approach. So, obviously one of the issues when you're working, well, we all know this as councillors, is that we're a bit siloed and we work in different departments, and particularly across children. We've got our communities team, we've got our employment teams working, we've got our housing team, and we've got different sectors feeding into this. And I wanted it to come forward so it's much more transparent, that you could see across what are we offering to our young people as an after school, and include things, so particularly libraries that now Sarah is in charge of, is, they've got doing this brilliant games program. So as you'll see, it's delivering some of these excellent things we've got in new places and in other places, in addition to just having things in these clubs and stuff. So I'll shut up now. So, Etienne.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, the point about listening is a really good one, and we've invited Nicola to. She represents the youth sector. She's our strategic partner for youth services. So, Nicola, I don't know if you just wanted to say a little bit about Young KNC and what you do and what you've heard from the sector as well.
Perfect, of course, yes. So first of all, thank you for inviting me. My name's Nicola. I'm the CEO of Young KNC. We are a local charity that was set up with funding and support from RBKC and also from John Lyons Charity, which is a local funder in this area. And our role really as a charity is we support local voluntary organisations that work with children and young people in this borough. At the moment, we have about 120 local voluntary organisations that are members of Young KNC, and we also work with maybe about 30 to 40 public sector and private sector bodies that also support the effort with children and young people, including the NHS and the police, and obviously our RBKC. And we work with partners to run grant programmes, with the decision making being led by local young people. And so we work with a wide range of local funders, including we work with RBKC on the Holiday Activities and Food Programme, which is a really brilliant programme for children who are eligible for free school meals. And we also work closely with Early Help and with Community Safety to support them on grant programmes as well. We also work with a range of local funders, including John Lyons and some of the private family foundations, and also with partners like the National Lottery, Children in Need, etc. And really just to try and generate as much support as we can for our local voluntary organisations that are working with children and young people. We do a lot of training for the sector as well, particularly for the frontline staff on issues like, say, reducing serious youth violence, safeguarding, and then just some of the basic skills that we need, like first aid, play work, youth work, so on. And we have a team of young ambassadors who are all local young people who work with us to do the decision making on our grant programmes. So, for example, last summer we ran a grant programme for inclusion of disabled young people. So we worked with local disabled young people to do the decision making on that grant programme. And what we would do is we would do the due diligence checks, check that the organisations are up to standard with things like health and safety and safeguarding. And then that we would take the local young people to visit, see what they think. They can ask any questions that they want. And then they can give their views and they can take very, very informed decisions, actually better decisions than we can take, because they know what they're looking for, and they know more about what the needs are for a local disabled young person than I do. I'd like to think that I'm trained and supportive in this area, but they still see things that I just don't see. We have quite a small team, but we employ local young people in our team as well. We feel that that's really important, that those voices are a big part of our operations and decision making. Just briefly on sector feedback. So we are always out visiting local voluntary organisations, and we run a lot of forums and workshops that bring local voluntary organisations together. And I feel a bit like everybody who's spoken before me has stolen my talking points, because I was asked about what some of the challenges are, and Holland Park have already told you what the challenges are with children and young people. It's kind of exactly what they said, the challenging behaviour, the social media, the mental health issues. And mental health and burnout is a big issue in the sector, not actually just for the children and young people, actually also sometimes for the staff who are having to deal with that day in and day out. It's really exhausting having to deal with that. And the other thing that's a big issue for the sector is funding and sustainability, and also the paperwork. There's a huge amount of paperwork now that's essential for working with children and young people, but for the voluntary sector, on top of that, there's all the application forms, monitoring and reporting, and so on and so forth. So in terms of how we respond, number one on my list, and Sarah can verify this,
I've seen it.
is listening. I promise you that I wrote that before I came to the committee meeting tonight. I've added to it relationships and trust because they're obviously critical as well. And I suppose when we're listening to the sector, one of the things that we're hearing is the importance of trying to reduce the impact of some of the paperwork on them. So, you know, one of the ways we try to do that is by going out with young people and having young people ask the questions. So instead of people filling in endless forms, they can just tell verbally. That's much easier for smaller organisations, particularly organisations who are maybe run by people who don't have English as the first language, say, to just chat to somebody rather than filling in a paper, a big form. Other things we've heard from the sector is the importance of core funding and the desire for grant funding. Full cost recovery is a massive issue for the sector at the moment. I think the sector really wants to be able to employ staff on London Living Wage and Living Pension and on reasonable wages, and to be able to maintain staff teams and retain good staff, you know, so there's that continuity for young people, and to be able to maintain recommended staff ratios for things like safeguarding and health and safety. And so there's a real desire to get more funding, more match funding, and that's one of the areas where we really want to help as Young KMC to try and bring in that additional match funding, whether it's through us by partnering with other funders or whether it's us helping some of those organisations to be able to go direct to funders, particularly funders that are out of borough. You know, getting some of these funders like National Lottery and Children in Need to invest more into this area is what we want to see. The last thing I wanted to say on sort of how we respond, I think there's a real desire from smaller organisations to be part of this as well. And one of the things we're hoping to do is to run a small grants programme alongside the youth funding with match funding from John Lyons that would give some of the smaller organisations the opportunity to get involved and be a part of delivering some of the priorities of the youth review. We're just in the process of applying to John Lyons for that funding, and I'm hoping that we'll get the go ahead from them to do that. And last few things to say just about the state of the sector at the moment. I think we're really lucky to have a very diverse and thriving voluntary sector in Kensington and Chelsea. I think it's a real strength for the borough, because we have lots of local people who give their time and expertise for free, either as volunteers or as trustees of organisations. And I know that many councillors are trustees, you know, so thank you for giving that time and support to the local voluntary organisations. I think some of the strengths from the voluntary organisations is I think they're fantastic at reaching and including children and young people from very diverse backgrounds, and also just bringing children and young people together, you know, maybe go to different schools or have different needs, you know, catering for those needs, whether it's religious needs, cultural needs, dietary needs, you know, whatever it is. I think the voluntary sector is very good at a holistic, person-centred approach and listening to young people and trying to help or to signpost to somewhere that will help. I think for that reason, the voluntary sector has a really key role working alongside early help and prevention, because it's that work where, you know, where maybe if you provide a holiday programme and a meal, you're helping that family just keep their heads above water so that they won't need that more expensive statutory intervention. And so it's a really critical part of the local ecosystem. So in summary, I just wanted to say we've got some fantastic voluntary organisations who give really exceptional opportunities for our local young people, and real privilege to be here tonight to speak on their behalf. Thank you.
Can I just say, because I think, you know, actually Catherine had an ambition that we do something different in order to strengthen the offer that we've got to young people, and that we set something up that allows for us to pull in as much match funding as possible. And I think that's really important. You know, we keep saying about listening, and listening is so important because people's needs change, and actually young people's needs change, and what they want changes. And so it's so important that we're constantly listening to what they're saying, listening to what our schools are telling us, listening to what the youth sector is saying to us about what it is that's needed. Often we talk about youth services and people jump straight to youth clubs. Actually, young people, 72% in a recent survey said actually it's leisure activities and gyms that matter most to us. 56% said that they access the libraries, and only 17% mentioned youth clubs. It's so exciting to see what All Saints are doing with their 7 till 7 project. And equally exciting that the Games Library is part of that, as well as some leisure activities that have been facilitated by the local authority. But I think Lauren mentioned something that's really important about relinquishing control. It doesn't always have to be, and nor should it be, the local authority who's in control. And actually, the more we can do to empower others who are perhaps closer to it than us, that actually it starts to create different ways of collaborating, which is quite exciting. So, and I think, and I probably should mention that the National Youth Association have just revisited their guidance to local authorities to really strengthen or encourage us to think about the youth offer as a holistic piece. So Catherine mentioned right at the start that actually we wanted to develop a whole systems approach to the youth offer, bringing together the little pieces of what everyone's doing into one big umbrella, so that actually people understand what the offer is, rather than having to go to lots of different places, and that it felt properly coordinated. And I think what we're trying to do is build on the strengths from the Youth Review in 2018, making sure that we're getting the most of getting the most from the money we're investing across the whole sector, ensuring that training can be delivered and shared across the whole sector, and really pooling expertise. I think that's really important. So you haven't got a paper today, you've got some slides which demonstrate where we're at right now in terms of what we've heard from various parts of the system, what current offer is, and what our thinking is in terms of principles. So now is a good time for you to ask us questions in order that your thinking and feedback informs how we actually then finally shape the offer. Do you want to start asking the questions?
Yes, if everybody said what they want to say.
Yeah, because I was going to go to Simon. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I should have said this at the beginning. We've made a little video for tonight where we interviewed local young people, and the video has actually been made for us by a local young person, and so really sad that we're not able to show that tonight, but I'd really encourage you to look at the video, and we'll make sure that that gets circulated.
Send us a link or something.
Yes. There is a link. There is.
Okay.
Yeah. Can I start the question? Do you want to start?
Yeah, if I could.
Go ahead.
That's really good. But firstly, I think that this is probably the first time I've heard a team come into scrutiny and actually volunteer a transformation. We had a big exercise in budget working group that all the council's finances, and the main recommendation for that, which looked at all sections of council's activities, that there needs now to be a transformation in the way we do things in the council across the piece. And there's been an enormous resistance about, well, we accept the principle, but we're not ready to talk about it yet. You've already started talking about it, so please don't be so modest about what you're doing. I think that we need to take to shine a light on this. First part of the question is: does this cover all of the aspects of youth provision within the councils associated with, or are there still areas of council funded activity which are not yet under the armpits?
I'll start. So if you look at page 32 of the appendix, this is what we're attempting to do there, and we haven't got all the information yet. So what I also wanted to see was to show all the other areas within the council that we're delivering services, but also we're inputting additional funding into the youth sector. So this is still a bit of work in progress, because one of the things you can't see in the paper, which we do from the council aspect, is is social investment terms in terms of giving people spaces for free to deliver programmes in, which we're still paying the maintenance cost of those. But so I think it would be really helpful actually for everyone to have that transparency.
It's something we've started to work on as other departments. So we have a budget for youth services that are commissioned, and we have a budget for community adventure play, which are commissioned. But in other departments, if we think about leisure, we've been having a really good conversation about mapping the provision that they have for young people as well. And we'll be doing the same with economic development. And so we're starting to build a picture of what services and therefore what funding is associated with young people from a council perspective across department.
What I'm trying here to get my brain around is provision, outcomes and funding and how they relate to each other. Obviously with the budget going through separate from this particular committee, we're looking for how those things tie up. And this appears to be probably quite a radical shift in the way that we're going to be doing things. And that therefore there will be some budgets moving from here to there and being used differently and so on. And it's not really a criticism of this paper, but it's not yet transparent as to how that's going to be done. And I think from an overall OSC point of view, we're going to have to get to a point at some time within the next 6 months, no longer than that, to see how this goes, because it will become part of the budget proposals for next year. So I think it's urgent, and really allied to that is the referred to here a larger paper or the paper or however you want to phrase it is going to go to the leadership team in June. Is this committee going to get sight of that before it goes to the leadership team? Because it's sort of unfortunate because and has that paper been written? When is it going to the leadership team first and so on? And it's all those sort of questions. I think whilst we're on section appendix provision by ward, I went through, and there's several primary schools mentioned providing stuff, and Brompton Handstand, Alder Primary School, that has a lot of provision for children of all ages. It's not mentioned at all. I wonder, Sally Keck's the head there. It'd be useful to talk to her. If I may, I think that just one final comment, it's not so much a question, I think part of the brilliance of this, and you have actually spoken about it in some detail, is that really here we're putting in some money from RBKC, and then there's some match funding coming up outside. So it gears it up. And I think that is a really truly transformational process, because it's not only trying to be more efficient in the process, but it's also bringing more resources into that process. So in a time of financial headwinds, that is really a big win.
Thank you. Well, you want to say, I mean, just in terms of the fund, I didn't quite understand the exact question about the grant. I mean, we've committed in this paper to how much money we're putting into it. Of course, until we actually go through the process with our panel and what people want and what people propose to us to cover all the things we want to deliver, we don't actually know how much every individual. So that was the bit I didn't quite understand.
It's really just saying that this at the moment, because I suspect because we've only got part of the paper, it's not yet transparent.
So I think, Will, if you don't mind me coming in, that piece around provision, outcomes and funding, we're constantly talking to the sector about that, and it's actually quite challenging when they're only dealing with a little piece of it. Actually, once you put it all into one big pathway, actually you can be clearer about that, and some of it will be outputs rather than outcomes, because of, how we measure things or how we count things. But I think you're absolutely right, we'll be in a better position to provide that framework when it's in its entirety.
But we've been asked to help the leadership team make the right decisions.
Yes.
On the right decisions around the offer that you give.
Yeah.
We haven't got.
Yeah.
The question is, are we getting at the same pace the input leadership teams get?
Right, sorry, that's the final piece, the report.
And so I think just to answer that, it's been an iterative process. So initially we were going to do the thing which would be less impressed by, which was just recommission what we had and renew the priorities. And we took this to some of the BCS organizations, and they did not like that at all. And so we have been through an iterative process with the voluntary sector to think about what a proposal might look like. That proposal is being drafted, so it will be made available to the Chair of Scrutiny and for your feedback and comments and input.
Do you mind saying I guess the information you've been given tonight is much more than anyone else has had. So you know, this is an opportunity for you really to see what the process has been and provide some access.
And can I just coming in, the leadership team only discussed it this morning first, so you're neck and neck really. And obviously they've also have brought up some things. For example, you'll notice in this paper we haven't got any of the legals advice in this and governance. So obviously there's quite a lot that we've got to do around adding that.
Sonia, you have a question?
Yes, I do. So obviously you've done lots of, I suppose, you reviewed the entire offer in the borough and engaged with lots of young people. Are you able to, I suppose, in my own observations, it seems to be the case, particularly when it comes to youth clubs and sports, that there is a larger male presence and there are fewer girls. And I think that's something that's come up here, a suggestion, more girls in sports and so on. And it's sort of throughout the document. Do you have any actual data or does anyone have, I suppose, measure this at all? How many girls actually take up the youth services we offer, particularly sports and youth clubs? And do we know why? I suspect it's that there are fewer girls than boys. Do we know why that's the case, and what are we going to do to try and improve that?
So as part of the holiday activity and the food programme, we've actually run a disproportionality dashboard, and we found that there is a significant disproportionality between men and young women attending sports. We've also identified that actually there's an overrepresentation of age groups as well. But to answer your question, yes, we do have the data on that in terms of who's attending our provision. I also think it's the type of activities that are on offer. And so as part of the youth review, what we found, and it's part of the inclusivity agenda. So what we found was we do need to make more activities available for young women and girls, and also structured activities for older age groups, so 14 to 17-year-olds. And under the inclusivity agenda, it's also making more activities available for young people with SEND, so special educational needs and disabilities. We need to make our universal services more accessible.
Do we have some girls only groups now? In order to.
In the engagement that you've had, has anyone said why they don't sort of go to their local youth club, or why they don't take up the offer?
So yes, intimidation is one thing. So if you're going, that's right. Or if there is a girls group running, it's boys watching them. So it's very difficult.
If it's sport.
Yeah, sports especially.
And is it also a sort of safety or environment? Is there
yes, definitely. Yeah, traveling back on to and from.
And is it just in terms of how it functions? Like, is it the council's job to think of activities that attract girls to actually join, or is it the voluntary sector, because they're the ones running it and they should really they should
this is the
promote.
We can encourage
Yeah.
in the right direction.
And it to me it sort of comes back to I mean, we can't relinquish control unless we know that the funding is going to good use and that we're getting value for money. So
Yeah,
I mean, if girls aren't turning up, then to me, that's not good value for money.
Which is why the girls only groups are actually quite interested
Yeah.
in encouraging girls to come along and participate in activities that are meaningful to them and that they want to do. And it's part of that piece around listening. So actually, what is it that girls are saying they want? And again, it's working with schools and the whole sector because, it's not one size fits all.
So one of the things we've done at the All Saints offer for the 77 wraparound is an all girls group football offer, and that is gaining quite a lot of popularity as well. So I think that there needs to be a sufficiency in a range of activities that need to also cater for young women and girls.
And I was just going to add, as you'll see, there's the piece in here, the £10,000 to encourage young people to sit on the panels and, as Nicola's already discussed, talk about it. So as they will be helping making the decisions of where the grant's going, and there will be obviously women and girls on that group, that they will be approving some of the activities that the voluntary sector bring up. And so hopefully if they've approved it, they will then want to go to it. So that was one of our safeguarding, rather than us just saying, we're going to do netball on a Tuesday just for you over here. They will help steer that's how it works.
Just to say, I think as well, the voluntary sector, I think this is progressing in this area. I think there's more girls attending than a few years ago, and more of the youth clubs are now running girls groups because they've realised that they need to do that to attract more girls in. And I think what they find as well is the girls might come along to girls group and then they get to know the staff, they get to know the youth club, and then they're more willing to come to the other sessions as well.
And I think as part of the proposals we're developing, there is something here about actually we want to put the funds where they'll make the most difference and where they'll meet gaps and needs. So this is one of the areas we've identified.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Got 4 questions. First of all, if I were a boy, aged between 13 and 18, and I want to know what's going on a Monday or a Tuesday or a Wednesday or a Thursday or Friday, where do I find out what's going on and in which will come?
We would go to the Our City website where we get all of the commission providers to list their activities. So, and there should be, I think there is a ward breakdown or a local breakdown on that website.
And then I can find out by ward and by activity.
Yes, you can.
You can. We need to get more listed on that website. For instance, at the moment, the activities that are funded by leisure services are not listed, and we really want them listed because that's obviously a really important part of the offer. And similarly, libraries, everything basically.
We got a group of young people with special educational needs and disabilities to see if they could find the activities that they wanted to do. The only activity they couldn't find was crazy golf.
Could I ask a supplementary on that?
I will.
But just a supplementary, it's who puts the information up on the website? Is it the provider of the activity or is it a centralized operation?
It's the provider of the activity. We run the website.
So you provide a platform
And they upload it. And it's a requirement to provide grant funding. If we grant fund them, they have to do it. And they have to do it before they get the money. But we need to get other groups that we don't fund also to put their stuff up there.
Thank
you. Question 2, did we involve and ask Victoria, the Kensington Chelsea Foundation, who has a different, nevertheless valuable input into an experience as to what she thought of this?
So we've involved NC Foundation, we've involved Young NC Foundation, we've involved the Social Council, so Angela Spence, and we've also involved Michael Ash from Voluntary Centre.
I think Victoria came with me to the first meeting about it that we had with Sarah, in fact. So,
how, on an ongoing basis, are we going to ensure that we reach, if not all, at least many?
So there's a part of what the proposals we're shaping. I think one of the things will be the funding. The other thing will be a delivery plan. And the delivery plan is all about achieving the whole system approach. And part of that delivery plan will be to develop campaigns, so working with comms to develop a campaign, as we've done with the holiday activity and food programme. And we'll be targeting schools and we'll be targeting parents to get the activity promoted. So, and just as we've done with HAD, we'll be running that campaign throughout the year.
And just actually just an idea that I haven't told Nicola about it. They came up today was one of the things that always concerns me is about comms, and exactly the point you make is how does anyone know what we're doing and what's going on? And we thought what would be nice was from our sort of investment in young people, and you've already had the films made young people, that it would be great if we could get a couple of young people who our comms team have already offered that they can come in and work with them and get some experience from them, so they're learning how to do it, but they're giving that young person's input in actually how we will best reach people.
Do we get them to come to speak to us here?
Okay. Yeah.
My last question, there is just outside KNC at the White City site,
Yeah.
a very new and state-of-the-art youth home, I understand.
Yeah.
How does that tie in with what you're doing here? Because it was my understanding, I spoke with one of your former ward colleagues about it, that they want to work very closely with anyone who wants to work closely with.
Well, I mean, from my perspective, it's fantastic that they're opening next door.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, it's just an addition to what we're doing here,
Yeah.
but it's a very different thing. It's all about going, this is a place called On Site,
Yeah.
which is offering everything under one roof that you can go and access all services. And it's very much businesses are engaging with it. Now, obviously, we're doing something very different, that we're almost going much smaller. So we're working with lots of smaller voluntary sector things to deliver in all sorts of different places around our borough. And as we say in the paper, to have more in the south, to have it more evenly distributed. So I mean, I think they complement each other.
And David, we've got a clear eye on what's going on. We are
We're going
looking
to
to
visit.
visit,
Yes.
and you know, we'll learn the lessons from them. You know, what's
Yeah.
working and what we might want to import.
And then to go back to the first and possibly third question, is it going to be on our website so that people can decide whether they want, for example, to go to something in Goldwood or Goldville or actually in White City?
So the Family Information Service website is being developed, and so we're linking in with what's happening there. So the answer to that is yes, but I think the model that we have, which is the Our City website, where providers are responsible for uploading their activities, is a much better one because it's then not static and it's constantly being updated.
They're welcome to upload onto the Our City website. Yeah.
Thank you.
But we're not going to promote the White City.
We'll give
Information.
that information on our family information. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I've got just mention a couple of questions. As I remember from the session this morning, one of the things that they said about all the different services that are being offered is noted about child poverty, and unless that can be tackled, because it's getting worse at the moment, obviously, then all the other services will be struggling because, you know, a child who's undernourished doing sports or out of school activities, whatever it is always going to struggle more than they need to. So it's you know, keeping children fed and so that was it came out quite a lot, didn't it? Unless we tackle poverty, everything else is going to fall behind. So that's just a general point which makes everything more difficult. It's now I came up quite a lot today. So I wasn't sure. I obviously read today. So the current arrangements will end in January 2025. So the finance which is noted here is that's stable. Is it? That's going to continue. That's
committed
every year
for 5 years. We said.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Of course, given that, well, as we've been hearing, there are additional services, especially more sports and other events for girls, and given that poverty is getting worse, sadly, and may not get better for a while, the service may have to reduce. So I know that costs are getting, because I've heard from quite a few of the local groups, and they say, oh, they're putting our rent up, or you know, the energy bills is unsustainable and so on. So
I just hope we'll have leeway when that happens. I think it's really important just to go back to the point that Will made, that actually through this approach, what we're hoping to do is by putting a lump sum with Young KNC, actually what it enables them to do is bring in more money.
Yes.
And which should actually make, I guess it kind of future proofs what we're doing.
Okay, well, that's good about things, Crystal. I just want to say something briefly about the girls' football. I've been in contact with the women's football team, and they were given a spot in Westway. And this is a very, very diverse group of women. There were hijabi women, people who've never had any exercise. So a lovely, diverse group of local mums who never take any exercise. And they went to Westway, and the men howled at them, and they would never go back there again. So they had used the pitch at St. Charles School, more private, but then it was getting bigger and bigger, and they wanted to go to St. Paul's, the playing field. But it cost about 5 times more. So they just couldn't expand, they couldn't deal with it. And one of the problems is for women, there may be young women who aren't used to exercise, or they feel overweight, or they feel uncomfortable with their bodies, and that's so the same boys laugh at them. And it's horrible.
Yeah.
My daughter was scarred for life. I persuaded her to go play tennis at the local park when she was about 7 with all her friends, and she came back in tears because the boys had laughed at her. And that's just what happens. It's horrible, actually. It's not right, but that's so having private space where who aren't as sadly as others. That's I think that's quite a big issue. So anyway, that was
Just on that, Emma, because I went to the Youth Action Alliance Day, which you've probably been to, football day at Westway, and there were several girls football teams there who really went for it. They were fantastic.
Yeah.
So we have already got the
there'll be other girls who just want to, which is it's lovely, and it has got very popular.
Yeah, it has.
And we need to encourage that.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
So the other thing is, and it was on page 41, I think, and I think you referred to it, which is that all these groups would rather have, they are funded by project rather than having core funding, which makes it almost impossible to plan. And I've heard that from Youth Action Alliance, but also others, that they need that stability so they can plan over 5 years. And that's not only for them or what they're planning, but for their staff and so on. Otherwise, they don't have the staff, they can't get the staff. Staff retention is an issue. So that's a thing. So we know this is going for 5 years, but the value that money, they're relying on money coming in to pay for the extra things.
So
I mean, is that's realistic, isn't it? That they will get other funding coming in.
So as we set the base budget for the start in February 25, will be including inflation. So
Right.
and that will be reviewed on a year-by-year basis, and budget will then be adjusted to account for inflation.
You will be able to plan ahead.
The second point then is that there will be, in terms of the proposals being developed, there will be core funding available for organisations, as well as grants for projects and activities as well. So it will be a blend, but a significant proportion of the funding will go towards grants or core funding. Your first point, I just want to get this in, is with holiday activity and food programme. We offer activity and meals, and in Kensington there's been an uptake of about 3,500 pupils, so it's really well attended.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
I mean, we see it and it's not that.
That's very good. And just to, in addition to the funding, as you'll see in the paper, that Young KNC have committed to adding an extra 750,000, as a starting point. Obviously, we're hoping they're going to raise a lot more than that. But I mean, if you just look at Westminster KNC, I mean, they've been raising up to £2 million extra, because one of the things is bringing in businesses, so as well as foundations and family trusts. And one of the key things that kept coming up was what we want more sort of employment and skills. And I think this is a really good way in which we can get all our local businesses that to actually get more involved with our young people and activities, and hopefully put some money where their mouth
We're
is.
already starting to talk to some of those businesses, and there's a lot of opportunities coming along for young people to have apprenticeships, for instance, and so it's partly match funding, but it's also in kind support and opportunities for young people. Because we know from young people that jobs and employment always comes up as one of the top priorities for what they want.
I'm not
So,
at all at the moment, actually, look, young people. That's why we just push this.
It's horrible.
And hope.
Alongside that, would there be mentoring opportunities as well?
I think so, definitely. Yeah.
Because even if business can't give a job,
Yeah.
give expertise.
Yes. Yeah. Work experience. That
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Might.
I'm done, yeah. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. My two questions are, one is, how are the pathways being strengthened? One, and two, looking at the map on page 23. And it looks like there is a huge concentration up in the north and a little corner in the south.
Yeah.
And there's nothing in the middle.
Yeah.
So are we we can't get canoeing in the middle, I can see that. Yeah. But what about the other activities?
So, as part of the youth review, this has been identified as a need as well. So there's a higher proportion of provision available in the north of the borough and far less in the south and also the centre. And so part of how we're going to be responding to that is actually then putting provision and focusing the funding and available provision in the south as well. But your point about strengthening pathways, it goes back to, so I think we're going to have an action plan and a delivery plan that from a council officer perspective is all about breaking down silos and working across departments to develop services for young people. So that's looking at your libraries and the games offer. That's looking at attending libraries as well. That's looking at your leisure services and making more of those gyms in the outdoor parks. So that needs to come from us as officers and building relationships across departments.
So one.
Okay, go ahead.
Sorry. Can't remember where it is, but I read somewhere that 5% of the young people taking up this offer NEET. I was wondering if that's a significant proportion of the number of NEET young people in the borough, or if that's something we could work on.
It's a pretty difficult statistic that, because obviously you only become NEET at sort of at an age, well, at 18, isn't it? Which is sort of slightly beyond the scope of what we're doing.
I was thinking because there's an emphasis on pathways and learning.
Yeah. So
a key part of this, is engagement with young people, and therefore there are opportunities to use this pathway to ensure young people are EAT.
Yes,
in
education
and training.
Sorry. Thank you. Thank you very much. We had a very good discussion and we covered quite a bit of points. We looked at challenges, mental health also featured again, social media, funding, sustainability, relinquishing control, listening more than actually, well, God, I guess, gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, and we need to use them in the same proportion. So I guess that's where the listening comes in. And we spoke about the use of view, composition of groups, discussed the differences and reasons of engaging young people and engage them in the process. We talked about the pathways, and I got a promise that we're going to do things in the middle, and I'm very happy about that.
So there are few children in there.
Not that many, huh? But maybe we need to work on that too. Anyway, thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Very briefly, there were 2 things I think you were going to give us. One was the video link.
Yes,
and
yeah,
then also, could you give us a link to the
Our City?
Our City.
Yes. Okay. I will. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, now we go to our final Can I please invite Bella to listen briefly at the time?
Yep, so we've just got the work programme, final report, and so at the back, I've listed all the different items we've had throughout the year and put them into different categories, so you can see the themes. And this is basically just an opportunity for you as the committee to suggest topics for the new municipal year. But also we'll be having a workshop on the 17th of June, where we'll bring along loads of different topics. So if you can't think of anything off the top of your head right now, feel free to email me. And I think Jackie's also emailed all councillors for any topics about any of the different committees.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Sarah.
Could I make?
Yes, absolutely.
You're asking for suggestions.
Yeah.
Could I make a suggestion that the work on Block 11 working group is extended from 11 to 18? Brackets. There should be recognition of 25 in HPP, SEM.
Okay, yeah.
And I think that there's an appetite in health and social care select committee to look, if you like, backwards to more younger stage of somebody's life, and to have some communication about problems they're dealing with which are made in the younger period. Because in the 0 to 11 area, there's some statistics that are suggesting that 40% of life chances are actually set in stone in that period. By the time you get up to 18, you're well over 50%. And all the things to do with obesity and mental health and so on are really baked in quite hard at that time. So a conversation between the two select committees, plus the extension of that work on the 0 to 11 to up to 18. That's a suggestion. There's another practical one is that I think that Chelsea Westminster Plus Innovation Charity have done some work on mental health and trying to look at ways in which young people who are not necessarily very confident or want to be seen struggling and engage with the services that are available. So I think that we might usefully get them in next year, tell us about the progress, and obviously we find out how far they've got. But yeah.
This actually Sonya's flagging up the proportion of young women and young men who get booked. Sparks something that I've been worrying about. We do spend a great deal of time worrying about what happens with young men and their behaviour and so on, which is perfectly reasonable. But I do feel a lot of women get left behind, and that there are a lot of reasons for that. Yeah. And they're not all good reasons. So I don't know quite what it would be. I'll have a little think about it. But
Something along the lines of, I don't know, looking at things that are holding women.
Well, sport would be one thing, but young women's engagement in. So I'll have to think about it. But I think something you could.
One of the things I thought about some years ago, I don't even know if it fits here or not, but I was looking at young female youth offenders and what happens after they come up, because in my opinion, these are the mothers of the future. So what we do with them and how we help them, they can, think that.
And I think that is quite a small proportion.
It is a small proportion, but still it's a proportion that I think we don't see or hear from at all.
And I do think that a lot of young women's lives get very complicated, especially in their teens. Mm-hmm. And the help, there isn't that help because they're quiet about it. Yeah. Young men often explode and young women often implode. Not always, but often. And that's, I'll have to think about what this would be, but I think that's something we could look at because there are actually more women than men, slightly more.
And I remember last select committee when we looked at the care leavers proposal, which was a great product, but I recall that there was a sort of almost no, there was a sort of special section for LGBT, a special section for other protected characteristics, but there was nothing for
Women.
women and girls who were in foster care are the most vulnerable of anyone to sexual exploitation. And I think Councillor Pascal mentioned social media and phones before.
Yeah.
Well, possibly there's something we can look at there with young teenage girls, how vulnerable they are to
Exploitation and.
via social media, even in schools and that sort of thing. So, but I also need to have it.
Yeah, something else.
David, do you have anything? Well.
No, I'm certainly this.
Okay, all right. Well, I guess that is us. That is it for this. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for all your support.
Thank you, Bella. Thank you, Lou.
Sorry?
I said, thank you, Bella. Thank you, Lou.
Yeah, and Mary and